Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Zach and this is Matt Easton.
Hi folks!
Matt Easton is a good friend of mine and occasionally we meet up to do some videos. You probably know Matt's channel if you know my channel, but you may not know that Matt is an antiques dealer.
Yeah, I deal in antique arms and armour and have worked at auction house and yeah, so I'm part-time YouTuber and part-time antiques dealer.
If you want to get something that was actually used, is actually an antique, then you can head over to
Eastern Antique Arms,
yeah, and get something real. I've got something which I hope is real here.
Okay.
In this bag is the first ever sword that I held and touched.
Okay.
It's been in the family for a while. It's my dad's, so I've gone over and borrowed it just to show you.
Right.
It's completely out of my normal area of expertise.
And I have no idea what it is. In fact, Zach hasn't even ever mentioned this until he came here today. I didn't know that this was with a bag. I was like, I thought it was some like cloth for making a gambeson or something. And so I don't know anything about this. He's never mentioned it to me before. I don't know. I've got no idea what it is. I don't even know if it is an antique.
It may not be because I think.
I hope for your sake it is.
Well, the story from my point of view is quite nice anyway because it was given to us by a relative of my parents.
Okay.
So it's got that family connection.
Okay,
anyway.
cool.
So
yeah.
Right, here we go.
Surprise, surprise.
So, like I said, outside of my normal area of interest, but really did help to inspire my love of swords and things like that. So, there it is.
Ah, well, okay. It is, 100%. It's a Coldstream Guards officer's sword.
Okay.
Did you know that?
My dad knows a lot more about it than I do, but I thought...
So there are a few things without taking it out of its scabbard that I can tell you straight away. So by looking at the guard, that's the so-called 1854 pattern guard, which was adopted by foot guards, which at the time meant the Grenadier Guards, the Coldstream Guards, and the Scots Fusilier Guards, as they were called at that point. There were no Irish Guards or Welsh Guards at that point in the Crimean War. So it was decided in 1854 that they would adopt their own model of hilt because obviously the foot guards, they're the ones you see in red with bearskins on top of their heads, stood outside Buckingham Palace, and horse guards. They kind of decided they wanted their own model of sword to their own specifications, and the hilt is fundamentally based on the 1827 Rifles officers' hilt.
Okay.
So they essentially adopted the Rifles style hilt made of steel. Up until that point they'd had a brass hilt, so they adopted a steel hilt which theoretically matched the colour of their buttons, I think. So usually the colour of a hilt, so if you had brass buttons you had a brass hilt, if you had silver buttons you had a silver hilt, but their hilts were actually made of steel and they were often plated. This is nickel plated, but some of them were actually silver plated.
Okay.
However, this isn't a Crimean era sword, even without taking the blade out. We'll get to the blade in a second.
I'm amazed by how much you know.
Well, it's my job.
Okay.
Because the back strap here, you'll see it is fully checkered. So it's got checkering all the way down the back, and that is the 1895 model back piece. We call it back strap in the modern collecting world, but in period it was actually referred to as a back piece. So this is an 1854 pattern guard with an 1895 pattern back piece. That means that this sword dates to after 1895. And I should mention, how do I know it's Coldstream Guards? Quite simply because that is their emblem there. So you can see it's got a cross inside the circle with the sort of star-like design around there. Okay. That's the emblem of the Coldstream Guards, and I have friends, in fact a friend of mine is Lieutenant Colonel in the Coldstream Guards who I went to university with, and I've got other friends who are in the Coldstream Guards as well. It's weird, I've ended up with actually quite a lot of Coldstream Guard swords in my collection, and I know people in the Coldstream Guards. I never had any form of connection to the Coldstream Guards, but I feel an affinity to them. And in fact, I've been out to the Battle of Waterloo field, where they defended the Hougoumont farm, most famously. If you watch the Sharp series, it was the Coldstream Guards that defended. They were one of the main defenders of Hougoumont farm. So.
Not Sharp.
Not Sharp himself. No.
That's a shame.
So essentially this is a post-1895 Coldstream Guards officer's sword. Now I will be able to tell you more about it when I take the blade out of the scabbard. So, and incidentally the hilt and the scabbard are nickel plated. That's why they're so shiny and silver, and that's why they don't rust. So the nickel plating protects the steel from the rust. Right, Oh, okay. So this is
let's
a
have that.
narrow, what we call picket weight blade.
Yeah.
So in fact, and that's not to say they weren't carried on active service, because actually I got some picket weight sort of narrow. These are narrower than normal weight blades, so they're less than an inch. So a picket weight blade is one that's less than an inch. If it's an inch or 1/1/16 or 1/8 of an inch, then that's known as service weight. So theoretically, when they brought out picket weight swords, they had one for dress or picket duties, or going to a ball or something like that, standing on parade. And then they'd have another sword for going and killing Russians in the Crimean War. And the one for killing Russians or anyone else they were fighting tended to be a bit broader, for obvious reasons. It was a cut and thrust sword at that time. By 1892, they'd actually brought in a thrusting model of blade, and that is this model of blade. So this is an 1892 pattern blade with an 1895 pattern backpiece and an 1854 pattern guard. We would simply refer to this today as a Coldstream Guards officer's sword. So it's the product of various updates to the design, and this is still the regulation model today. So if you were in the Coldstream Guards, you could absolutely wear this on parade in front of Buckingham Palace. So this is a picket weight blade. The person who bought this blade probably had a broader one as well.
Okay.
That being said, yeah, it's not been sharpened. So a lot of these swords were actually sharpened at the beginning of World War I. 1914 was famously the last time in British history that the order to sharpen swords and lances and bayonets went out.
Okay.
And in 1914, they didn't yet know about tanks and aeroplanes and things like that. They weren't thinking about trench warfare. They had a perception that it was going to be like the Franco-Prussian War, and there'd be big cavalry actions with thousands of squadrons of cavalry. And bear in mind as well, that had happened to some degree in the Japanese-Russian War in 1904-06. So they'd looked at that war only 10 years before with lots of bayonet charges and thought that was what was going to happen.
Am I right in thinking as well that the opening stages of the war did include that sort of thing?
Yeah, and funnily enough, the final stages as well.
So the first blood was taken by a cavalryman.
Yeah, with a cavalry sword. Yeah. But for British anyway, the first British kill of World War One was with a sword. Probably, although I have found some evidence recently that is debated, and it might be someone was shot. But nevertheless, there was an early confirmed kill with a sword.
It's easier to confirm with a sword.
Yeah, there's more eyewitnesses.
Yeah.
It's closer up. But, they were used a lot in the East as well. We tend to fixate on the Western Front. Mm-hmm. But as we've spoken about before, there was of course an Eastern Front. There was a war where with the Russians, and later on there was the Russian Revolution, and there were lots of swords used then as well. And equally down in North Africa and the Middle East, there were lots of swords used by Lawrence's Arab army against the Turks, and the Turks used lots of swords as well.
Yeah.
So swords were used lots in World War One, despite the fact that there were machine guns and aeroplanes and tanks.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's have a look if we can see a Monarch's cipher on it. There we go, GVR, so George V.
Okay.
So this is George V. So this is, George V was 1910 until 1930 something, I think.
I love that you can tell me what year this hilt was made, but you can't quite remember when George.
No, I can't remember when George V died.
Yeah.
It was about 1930 something, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, because then George VI. Then we had Edward VIII briefly, and then so that was not long before the Second World War. But statistically, most George V swords date to around World War One. The reason being that during World War One, there was the army had to massively expand, and there was huge recruitment, and officers suffered greater losses per capita than private soldiers did, because they were leading from the front at the beginning with a sword in hand, and they were getting shot by marksmen. So in fact, officers died at a very high rate, particularly at the beginning of the war. So anyway, this is a World War One-ish era. If this was a Wilkinson, it would be numbered and we'd be able to tell you exactly the year, but it's not. This was actually retailed by E. Smith of Savile Row.
Okay.
So that's an outfitter. So in other words, when you're an officer, you have to buy all your gear. You have to buy your uniform, your hats, your different uniforms for different occasions, just everything, basically. You'd have to buy all your own stuff, as well as like camp beds and everything. And they would have bought this, and probably they would have bought two swords. So this was the picket weight one. They would have had a service sword as well. Yeah. Probably, not definitely, but probably. And so they went to Savile Row, and Savile Row, even today, if you want to buy a very expensive suit, you go to Savile Row, and that's where you buy it. And how Savile Row really started out in this period was military outfitters. So they would have gone and they would have bought their sword and their uniform and everything from one shop. In terms of the maker of this, I think I'm not sure of the maker of that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Sometimes, so just here we've got something called the proof slug, that little gold disc. And sometimes from the design in there, you can identify who the maker is. So that will sometimes tell you the maker,
Okay.
while that will be the outfitter,
Yeah.
the clothing shop, essentially. But in this case, I can't tell who the maker is. But this does have the officer's initials on,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't be that difficult to identify who
Track
saw
them
this.
down.
I don't know if, do
Yeah.
you know? Or-
My dad has done some research into
Okay.
it. We're working on it.
Yeah,
Well, he's working on it.
cool.
More than me. But
Yeah, but it should be World War One era, and
Yeah.
obviously his initials are CB, and he's in the Coldstream Guards, so the army list you can find online for free. And one thing to mention about the Guard swords is that all of these are battle honours.
Yes.
So these you probably won't be able to see on camera, but all down here you've got etching, and that's acid etching, and also down here. And that basically lists all of the battle honours that the Coldstream Guards fought in. So it's got everything from, where does it go? It starts all the way up at
Tangier.
Tangier. Can't read that one. We can't read them all, but nevertheless, you basically, and then you've got Dettingen,
Egypt.
Lancels,
Talavera.
Egypt, Talavera, all of the campaigns they fought in. One of the last ones, I mean, until you get to World War One, I think the last one was the Egypt 1882 campaign. I think was the last one before. It's the Boer War, of course. They've got Modder River there,
Yeah.
so you've got the Boer War ones on the other side. They don't necessarily list all of them, but they get given battle honours, and
Yeah.
they add them to the flag, and that's what this has got all the Coldstream Guards.
Sure.
So there we go.
Brilliant.
So
Thank you very
it is 100% bona fide, genuine
Coldstream.
Guards.
So this might have stood outside Buckingham Palace.
I think almost guaranteed it did. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Because everybody, any officer in the Coldstream Guards at some point has been stood on parade and ordered the men around outside Buckingham Palace, and also things like Trooping of the Colour, and at the Tower of London they do guard duties there as well. So yeah,
Brilliant.
there we go.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. Guys, if you'd like me to find out more about CB, whoever this guy is, then leave a comment down below, because this is some promising start, and I think it might be more interesting to find out some more about this.
And one sad thing to bear in mind, of course, is when you're researching swords of World War One or in the run-up to World War Two, there's always the possibility that they're a casualty of war.
Yeah.
In some cases, swords that were in the interwar years bought then, they're people that served in World War Two, and although casualty rates for officers were much better in World War Two, and the Coldstream Guards in some cases were in tanks and stuff, and they were given armoured an armoured branch and this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, like I said, guys, leave a comment if you want me to do some more research on this. Don't forget to like and share, subscribe, and check out my Patreon down below. And if you are thinking about getting a family heirloom for yourself, then you can check out Matt's shop at Easton Antique Arms. There'll be a link in the description.
Cool.
See you guys.